Many of our impressions of ourselves are based strictly on past points of view, past beliefs, behaviors and experiences we had throughout our life. The author suspects that many of our choices are based on the assumption that I am just that kind of person. A few examples might be, I get my coffee at Starbucks, or I do not go to Costco. Are you a beach or a mountain person? We all have set ideas about what kind of people we are. Once we've decided these things, it can be difficult to change. And most of the time, that is all for the best. We don't have to think too hard about most things. There is, however, a fundamental problem with this mental picture of ourselves. People change. There are tumultuous periods in our lives when we can experience drastic changes. For example, in evolving romantic relationships, in divorce, having children. Often we are aware of these changes. After you had kids, you probably noticed that suddenly you become a morning person. It's just life brought it on you. But most changes happen gradually and under the radar. A few mechanisms of these changes are well understood, such as the mere exposure effect. The more you're exposed to something, the more you tend to like it or be like it. Another more troubling one is that the more your desire for something is frustrated, the more you tend to dislike it or identify as not liking it. These changes happen gradually, often without us noticing anything. The problem is this: if we change while our self-image remains the same, then there will be a deep divide between who we are and who we think we are, or how we present ourselves. And this leads to internal conflict. We are exceptionally good at dismissing even the possibility that we might change. Most of us tend to believe that we are who we are now, finished product. We'll be the same in 5, 10, 20 years. But as psychologists have found, our preferences and values will be very different in the not so distant future. Why is this important? It might be okay when it comes to ordering an espresso. Maybe you now slightly prefer cappuccino, but you think of yourself as an espresso kind of person. So you keep ordering espresso. You might enjoy it a little bit less, but it's no big deal. But what is true of choosing your coffee in the morning is true of other preferences and values in life. Maybe you used to really enjoy studying philosophy, or you enjoyed watching football, but you no longer do. But being a philosopher or being an avid football fan is just part of who you are, your self-image, so you just keep doing it. There can be a huge difference between what you like and what you actually do. What you do can sometimes be dictated by what kind of person you think you are, and not by what you actually enjoy. The harm in this situation is that the human mind does not like contradictions of this kind. The mind does its best to hide this contradiction, a phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance. Ignoring the contradiction, this internal disagreement or dissonance, creates discomfort, and we seek a way to bring reconciliation. It takes a lot of mental effort to rationalize or find evidence to support one value or to remodel them or to seem more alike. And all this use of mental energy leaves little energy for other things. It can tire you out. And if you have limited mental energy left, because of this cognitive dissonance, it's much more difficult to switch off the TV or to get off of Instagram or Facebook. You just habitually do what you've been doing. If we take the importance of change in our lives seriously, we understand that knowing yourself is a moving target. You might be able to know what you think of yourself in this moment, but what you think of yourself can be very different from who you are and what you like. And in a couple of days or weeks, all of this might change anyway. Knowing yourself can be an obstacle to acknowledging and making peace with constantly changing values. If you know yourself to be such and such a kind of person, it limits your freedom considerably. You might have been the one who chose to be an espresso person or a donating to charity person. But once these features are built into your self-image, you have very little say in which direction your life is going. Any change could be either self-centered or lead to that internal conflict, a cognitive dissonance. When do we know that something's not working in our life? When do you know it's time for a change? Thomas Boswell, a sports writer for the Washington Post, retired after 52 years. He was explaining his decision to retire. He used as an example a scene from the movie, The Man with Two Brains, with Steve Martin. Steve Martin is staring at a picture on the wall of his deceased wife, asking her about a person he's falling in love with. He says, "Becca, if there's anything wrong with my feelings for Dolores, just give me a sign." The whole room starts shaking. Things start flying around the room. Her picture starts spinning on the wall. And you hear a woman's voice shrieking, "No, no, no." It all stops. And Martin is sitting there with his debris all over the place, his hair all messy. And he says matter-of-factly to the portrait, "Just any kind of sign. I'll keep a lookout for it." Any kind of sign. In your life, are there any pictures spinning on the wall? Thomas Boswell, a sports writer, finally admitted to himself that after 52 years at the Washington Post, his energy level did not allow him to continue producing the high quality of work he was used to, and still leave him the energy for the other things he wanted to do in his life. He was changing, and he needed to change some things in his life. He couldn't deny it anymore. We all have aspects of our lives that are not optimal. We all have habitual ways of doing things and viewing the world. Our non-productive ways of thinking or being in relationships are usually obvious. We know it would be advantageous to change them. And then there are times in our lives we act just like Steve Martin in the movie scene. Everything in our experience may point to a need for a change, and yet we continue the same habitual patterns. The question is, how do we recognize a situation for what it is and make the necessary changes? Assume that we feel something in our life is not working. What is our process for creating change? Every faith and religion has a vision or an ideal of the perfect state of mind, a personal peace that is attained that relieves the worries and frustrations of our experiences. The path to this desired state of mind or state of being is expressed in the sacred literatures of all religions. Reading and studying a religion gives one an historical account and insight into the theology and philosophy of the individuals who developed and documented that particular faith. Studying and repeating the literature of a faith can be completed in the same way one might copy another's homework. You saw the material, did enough to have an idea of what the teacher wanted, but because you borrowed the homework, you really don't have a working knowledge of the subject. You did enough to pass the test. I know I did that a lot. There is no substitute to doing your own homework. It does not matter which faith you practice, or how great a teacher you have found, or what a great library you've collected. You must do the personal, soul-searching homework yourself. Your work is not to learn someone else's interpretation of their story or their interpretation of the sacred literature. There comes a time when you must apply all your learning to your life, day by day, on a personal basis. The scriptures in all religions are in parables. They're kind of hard to understand. There's a reason for that. You must learn to, whatever that nugget of knowledge is, it needs to be in your perspective. Each of us forms our own understanding of our place in the world and our relationship to other humans. We also form an understanding of our relationship with Spirit, with higher consciousness, with God. We have individual stumbling blocks that create worry and stress in our life. It may be our relationship with a family member that just is always a little stressful. It may be the way we view our own accomplishments. We may not give ourselves enough credit. We might have a temper. We may not feel comfortable expressing our points of view. Situations in your life that reduce your willingness to accept new information or to be honest with yourself restrict your spiritual growth. These blocks might be viewed as the picture of Becca spinning on the wall, and something you should pay attention to. Anything that consistently reoccurs that causes stress in your life, it's where your work starts. When you're at that place that you're ready to do your homework, writing out your thoughts and emotions can be a very effective way to clarify the way that you see life. Nobody else had your relationship with your mother or your father. Nobody else was in your body through elementary school, middle school, and high school. You are the only one who can recall all those emotions and beliefs that you developed over a lifetime. As an adult with life experiences, you can contemplate your emotions and beliefs, allowing you to view old beliefs from a more mature point of view. It's helpful to write down our thoughts. Many times, people have ideas that feel like the perfect solution. You know how you're sitting there and you go, oh man, I know exactly what to do. But when you write down the idea on paper, when you really try to see how you're going to implement it, the weakness of the logic can become apparent. When directing our attention to a personal situation and looking for the cause and a solution, we're confronted with the same mental phenomena of jumping to conclusions. Our thought processes have been the same. That's why we're where we are. So unless we really put in some work, we're just going to come to the same conclusion we always have. Writing allows us the opportunity to see the bigger picture, the strengths and the weaknesses in our logic. A few years ago, I saw a documentary on Amy Tan, the author of the Joy Luck Club. And this is a paraphrased segment from the documentary. My childhood, with its topsy-turvy emotions, has in fact been a reason to write. I can lay it out squarely on the page and see what it was. I can understand it and see the patterns I went through. In each story, we are untangling a knot in a huge matted mess. The work of undoing the knots, one at a time, is the most gratifying part of writing. But the mess will always be there. Spontaneous epiphanies always leave me convinced once again that there is no greater meaning to my life than what happens when I write. It gives me awareness so sharp that it punctures all layers of thought so that I can rise. That is what it feels like, a weightless rising to a view high enough to survey the moment of the past that led us to this one. Too soon the feeling dissipates, and I am hanging on to contrails as I come back down to a normal state of mind. Has my imagination worked this way since birth? When did I start noticing that one thing is emotionally like another? When did emotion and imagery start colluding? Whatever imagination is, I am grateful to its elasticity and willingness to accommodate whatever comes along. I just have to let go of self-consciousness for it to spill out freely. as if all I was doing was listening to music. The documentary on Amy Tan revealed generations of pain and dysfunction in her family and in her life. At the same time, the documentary revealed the beauty and wisdom that Miss Tan learned from examining her life, listening to her mother's story, and writing about it. When Miss Tan referred to her difficult relationship with her mother, she said, "Hope is never hopeless. Hope is love of life." And I think that was something my mother and I both understood. We read books, we watch movies that stir something inside of us. Emotions of empathy, fear, courage, laughter, all types of emotions are triggered by what we call entertainment. Triggering these emotions is an effort to understand ourselves. When we are watching movies and reading books, we put ourselves into the situations in the storyline. It is a way to try on that feeling or emotion borrowed from someone else. Knowing yourself is a lifelong quest. You continue to evolve with life experience. I don't believe there's any substitute for personally witnessing, contemplating, and documenting your own memories, your thoughts, and your actions, allowing you to put them in perspective. A quote from the filmmaker, James Redford, the son of Robert Redford, who produced the documentary on Amy Tan. He said, "It is the best possible use of my time as a filmmaker to take stories around complex issues and render them relatable and understandable, and entertaining in a way that gives people hope." Each one of us has a story to tell. Understanding our story allows us to get past the emotions and the blocks triggered by our own history. This allows us to put our lives in perspective. And in the words of James Redford, make our story relatable and understandable. Understandable to our most important audience, ourselves. Review your own story. Understand it, and allow all of it to be interesting. The highs and the lows. If we block them off, we're giving them energy. If we allow them to be part of us, we can use that energy. Knowing yourself is a lifelong journey. Who do you think you are? Who do you feel you are? And by far most importantly, who do you want to be? In conclusion, strive to understand yourself. Do your homework. Appreciate all the many facets of your journey. Move forward knowing you have the power to understand and create who you want to be. Blessings.